Geico presents sharing versus oversharing. Earlier this week, Claire Tippins shared a princess nickname generator, 3 pictures of her dog wearing a tutu, and 2 online quizzes, including what candy is your dream castle made of? Claire, your sharing has tipped the sugar scale and turned into oversharing. But have no fear, princess. Geico has something worth sharing with your internet kingdom, like how you could save hundreds on your car insurance just by visiting geico.com. No magic wand required. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Blog Talk Radio.
For Thursday night, May 26, 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now on Stitcher as well as iTunes, so check it out. Also check out King Jordan Sports and Media.com. Next week we have the debut of David Bruno, and on June 16th it's Casey Anthony, 5 years later as the anniversary show. Tonight on the show, we'll talk about Cal Harris acquitted nearly 15 years later after 4 trials, believe it or not. We'll get into the Michelle O'Connell situation. Was that suicide or murder? We have an expert to talk about that one. Bill Cosby to stand trial, believe it or not, and we see that he's blind, so we'll have to form an opinion on that one way or another. But let's go out to our guest tonight. First of all, he is literally in New York City right now. He's a defense attorney. You could call him at any time if you're ever in trouble. Let's bring in the one and only Alex Sanchez joins us. Good evening, Alex. How are you?
Jordan, how are you? And it is a pleasure to be here. And I am sitting in my car outside of a Manhattan courthouse because they have broken for dinner. And I'm waiting to do an important matter that is coming before the court. But that's the life of a criminal defense attorney. You know, I got home today. Was not planning on going to work tomorrow, and I took off my tie and my shirt, my suit, and I put on some sweats and was going to relax, maybe take the dog to the dog park. And all of a sudden I got a call, and somebody needed assistance. And back came the shirt and tie and the suit. And I raced downtown to do this case. And that's why I'm here.
Well, let's bring in our forensic expert. You see him basically every day on the Nancy Grace Show. That is our pal Joseph Scott Morgan, who joins us. Good evening, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hey, Alex, I'm actually laying in my bed with my wife over here and my faithful dog in between us. So, hey, life is good.
I'm very jealous.
I've just returned home from being in downtown Atlanta on the Nancy Grace Show this evening, and taped that. And it's been a long week, so it's good to finish up with a couple old friends here and just chatted up with you guys and chatted up with all the fans out in the audience. It's so good to be able to be back with you. I thank you for the opportunity just to talk. And it's been a while, and good to be back with you guys.
Oh, absolutely. And, we have this case out of Baltimore. It was a bench trial. Here's the details for the audience, and then we'll talk on the other side.
The verdict is in, and it is not guilty for Baltimore police officer Edward Nero.
So obviously we're outraged, angered. This is a miscarriage of justice.
The 30-year-old and his defense team spent the last week fighting assault and endangerment charges after prosecutors alleged the officer arrested Freddie Gray without probable cause and was negligent when he did not buckle the prisoner into a seatbelt.
Freddie Gray did not kill himself. He did not kill himself, yet though he's dead. Somebody needs to be held accountable.
Gray died last April, a week after his neck was broken in the back of a police van while he was handcuffed and shackled but left unbelted. During the trial, Nero's attorneys argued the officer himself did not arrest Gray, and the responsibility of buckling in detainees falls on the driver of the police van. Gray's death led to widespread anger and protests in the streets of Baltimore for more than a week, prompting a citywide curfew. The investigation ended with 6 officers being charged in the case.
No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace!
Officer Nero is the second officer to stand trial, but the first to reach a verdict after Officer William Porter's manslaughter trial last December ended with a hung jury. In court, observers say Officer Nero showed no reaction when that verdict was read. That verdict, not guilty on all 4 counts against him. Elizabeth Hur, ABC News, New York.
Alex Sanchez, this went straight to the judge. Obviously this turned out to be a good judge. This was an African American judge acquitting, I think, a white guy. I'm pretty sure. What's your feelings on this?
The only time a person who is standing trial waives a jury is if they are pretty sure that a judge is going to find them not guilty because the evidence is very weak or it doesn't rise to the level of criminality. Now, the case against this fellow was very weak. It wasn't very strong. I mean, the entire case was based upon the fact that they, illegally arrested him and that he didn't buckle him in. And, if you're going to argue that somebody, you should be held criminally liable because you illegally arrest somebody, that's really pushing it. If you arrest somebody illegally, a person could sue. They could bring some type of complaint with the police department, but to hold police criminally liable for illegally arresting wasn't like a malicious arrest, like a case I had one time where a police officer took a romantic interest in my client's girlfriend. This is a true story. And what he did was, this cop was crazy. He would follow my client around, and then finally he approached him and said, "You stay away from this woman or I'm going to put you through the system." Well, my client said, "Well, what are you, crazy? I'm not going to stay away from my girlfriend." And the cop arrested him and put him through the system. Now, that cop was arrested, and he was brought up on criminal charges. But in this case, the cop, I don't think, was arresting Freddie Gray along with the other officers for, some diabolical, malicious purpose. Maybe he was wrong, but that should not hold somebody criminally liable. In other words, it's a terrible tragedy, but the judge made the right decision in this case.
Joe Scott Morgan, you've been following the Freddie Gray trial. What's your take on this?
I think it's important that we take a moment and kind of think back to what they ruled Gray's cause of death is. It was classified as a high energy injury, and that's our cause of death. And you have to think about what the causality was. As we know, he was restrained That is, his hands were in flexi cuffs. He was in the back of essentially a tin box on wheels, if you will, with, a number of kind of protuberant edges and bolts and things like that were sticking out. And this high energy can only be generated, say, for instance, with some kind of blunt force that occurs. And this is very common, say, for instance, or not very common, but it's something that could be expected if you're incapable of protecting yourself as you're going down the road and you're unrestrained, say, seated in an upright position, and you can't control the inertia of your body moving. You're not being held in place, so it's bouncing up and down the road, and this creates this energy, this energy that leads to this trauma of the spine. Now, that's the cause of death. Now, I think where a lot of people kind of get confused is they hear that the medical examiner ruled this as a homicide.
Right.
This brings into question, just so that people in the audience understand, the medical examiner is not bound by the same constraints that the court is bound by, okay? If the medical examiner, the medical legal community rules something as a homicide, that means that they also had the option of ruling this as an accident, okay? But they felt as though that this was, as it's framed in its purest sense, that one's death at the hand of another, and that's how we define homicide. It's not assigning criminal blame. That's why, for instance, when I'm teaching death investigation class, I never use the term murder. Murder is a lawyer's word. It implies it's theatrical. You can think of all these kinds of things, images that it conjures up, everything from Hamlet to all these other things. Homicide is a very clinical term. It simply means that an individual's death was brought about at the hand of another. I think that people, when they see that his manner of death was, in fact, a homicide, they automatically assign criminality to that. In my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion as a medical legal death investigator, if I was looking at this case, I would say from a prosecutorial standpoint, this is a huge overreach on the part, in this particular case, with this particular officer, that you're going to charge him in this case. And again, he was not specific. Keep in mind, this guy was not specifically charged with this guy's death, with Gray's death.
Right.
He was charged with things like negligence. And there was even one little phrase in here, Alex, that talked about corruption, which I found very, very odd. And to me, that just kind of smacks of an overreach. And I was kind of interested in hearing what you thought about that, Alex.
Yeah, I don't know where, the prosecution really had a very poor theory entering this case. And something, as they were presenting evidence in this case before the court was being very critical. I don't know if you followed that trial, but the judge, I don't know if the audience followed the trial very carefully, but as the prosecution was presenting their evidence, the judge was like pulling his hair out of his head, saying, "What are you talking about? What is the theory of your case? How are you connecting him to a crime?" And it almost sounded, normally defense attorneys argue that the police acted improperly in stopping somebody and arresting them. In this case, the prosecution was arguing that the police acted improperly by stopping somebody, and the defense was arguing that the police acted properly. So everything was all twisted and turned, but in the end, the judge could not find a legitimate legal grounds to find this guy culpable of committing a crime. And that's why he found him not guilty.
That is interesting. And the other case was they couldn't come to a verdict, so we'll see if they redo that. So far, they're 0 for 2 with those officers. I think there's 2 more to be charged. So we'll see what happens in the upcoming months with that trial. We got another big trial and a big ruling after 2001. After 4 trials, husband found not guilty in the murder of his wife. Here's some sound that we'll talk on the other side.
All right, love you.
In his fourth murder trial spanning nearly a decade, businessman Cal Harris was acquitted of killing his estranged wife.
I miss some of the best years of my life as a parent, and I'll never get those years back.
Harris fought back tears after hearing the not guilty verdict decided solely by a judge. He spent 3 days and about 12 hours deliberating in an upstate New York courtroom. Harris was charged with murdering his wife Michelle nearly 15 years ago, late at night on September 11, 2001, the same day as the 9/11 attacks. Her body was never found. Harris was found guilty of the crime twice, but both convictions were thrown out. The third trial was moved to a different county where a judge declared a mistrial. In this fourth trial, Harris opted out of a jury, leaving his fate up to the judge. 15 years later, Harris, with his children by his side, claims the case is far from over.
This case is not over. I'm not happy with the way this thing was handled, obviously, and we're looking for some kind of retribution and accountability for those that were responsible for where we are today.
In the meantime, he's planning a vacation.
We haven't been on vacation in I don't know how many years together, so I would like for us to go away together as a family on vacation.
For InsideEdition.com, I'm Lee Sheps.
Alex Sanchez, New York defense attorney. Wow, 4 different trials. That's amazing in its own right. And you have an acquittal with a bench trial. What's your take?
Yeah, 4 trials is amazing with one person.
Right.
And the thing is, every time there's a trial, you generate a whole new record. There's brand new cross-examination. You know what the witnesses previously testified to. Maybe new evidence emerges, and you're able to contradict a witness based upon this new evidence. You compare their testimony they said in the first trial with the second trial and the third trial. And as time goes on and as more evidence is generated and more information is produced, defense attorneys can have a field day in creating all kinds of questions and reasonable doubt. And I think that's exactly what happened in this case. And also, as time goes on, 15 years, who knows, maybe some witnesses passed away, maybe some witnesses disappeared, or maybe some witnesses, for whatever reason, that were no longer available or no longer willing to cooperate or moved or got in trouble. Who knows what happened. But the bottom line is that it reached a point where the defense said, something, I now have enough evidence, or I now believe I can sufficiently contest the people's case. And that's why he waived the jury. And he waived the jury because he thought he was going to win the case. That's the only reason why you waive the jury. And he waived the jury, he made the right decision, and he was found not guilty. But something, this guy, I don't know if he did it. I don't know if he didn't do it.
Right.
But if he did it, or he had any connection with it, do yourself a favor. Just disappear into infinity, move away, and hope this case just disappears from the public consciousness. Because there have been cases in the past where people have been found not guilty, and they've made such a big stink that they've been framed and they've been railroaded by the government, like that Marine Colonel McDonald, who was initially found not guilty by a military grand jury. And then he started going on TV and accusing the Army of framing him. And then the Army just said, hey, wait a minute, let's take a second look at him. And they turned around and they prosecuted and they convicted him based upon a new examination of the case. Don't let that happen here. Know when to walk away and say, I've won and I'm finished. That's only, of course, as if he did it.
Yeah. Joe, weigh in.
Yeah, I think one of the most fascinating things to me about this case is in the absence of a body from a forensic standpoint, and that's kind of the driver. I've got to be perfectly honest. I have not followed this case. There's so many of these cases that kind of swirl around out there, But in my field, working with the body it's within that context that we derive a lot of physical evidence, and a lot of the things that I'm assuming that they came up with in this case is relative to circumstantial evidence, which are very, very difficult cases, as the esteemed counsel Alex can certainly attest to more so than I. But there's a term that many in the audience will be familiar with in law, and it also applies in forensic evidence, and it's referred to as corpus delicti, and that's the body of the crime. I've always been quite fascinated by these cases where someone is tried for a homicide in the absence of a corpse. Where is that body of evidence? And in a case with a death like this, the most compelling piece of evidence that you have for most of the time is that you do have a body that you can look to, that you can see autopsy photographs, you can see crime scene photographs with a body present. They still have yet to have even one iota of her person that they're able to present with. All they know is that she is absent. And I think one of the terms that keeps being floated around here is that they're viewing her still as a missing person. But yet this guy is being tried for murder. And to me, the dynamic of this thing is just absolutely fascinating to me. And I'd love to hear what Alex thinks about that, just in that context of the absence of the body itself.
No, Joe, I think you need to expand your horizons. I mean, you're limiting yourself to everything that's of a physical nature. And you're right about one thing, is that obviously there must have been some other type of evidence linking it. There has to be. There has to be either blood or fingerprints, or there has to be, some type of written documentation, or there has to be some admissions or statements that he made. He was seen somewhere. Maybe there's photographic or videotape, but there has to be something. Anytime you look at any case, if they're going to prosecute somebody, there must be some type of evidence linking the person to the offense. And in the absence of a body, obviously, it's going to have to be something else. It's going to have to be blood, fingerprints, like we said, statements, tape recordings, or there has to be some type of a motive. But even if there's motive, there's got to be some type of physical or some type of circumstantial evidence linking the person to the offense. So obviously, when there's no body, it's very challenging for the police to prosecute a case. But they do it, but it's usually when there's other evidence in the case which they're able to establish and bring to the attention of the jury.
Okay, let's get to this mother who, was it an accident or did the husband kill her? Here's some sound.
New developments in a deadly mystery. A family pointing to a new autopsy trying to prove a young Florida mom was murdered after her death was ruled a suicide. Her family has long suspected her boyfriend, a sheriff's deputy, even though he's repeatedly been cleared of any wrongdoing. ABC's Gio Benitez is here with more. Good morning, Gio.
Robin, good morning to you. This investigation is 5 years in the making. A case made famous across the country because the family is convinced this was cold-blooded murder.
Please, my girlfriend, I think she just shot herself.
Suicide or murder? That is the question surrounding the 2010 death of 24-year-old Michelle O'Connell, and pitting her family against the man they believe killed her.
We knew that she didn't kill herself, and that should bring justice to Michelle's death.
Now O'Connell's family says they have new evidence proving she was murdered, and they believe her sheriff's deputy boyfriend at the time did it. O'Connell, the mother of a 4-year-old girl, died of a single gunshot wound. The gun belonging to her boyfriend, Jeremy Banks.
Whatever, please. Deputy Banks of the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. Get someone here now.
Police ruled it a suicide, but McConnell's family never believed that, fighting to have the case investigated as a homicide. Their story profiles on the Dr. Phil Show.
When you say it's just overwhelming that this was a suicide, I'm sorry, I don't see it that way.
The family taking matters into their own hands, hiring an independent medical examiner to conduct a new autopsy, telling the TV show Crime Watch Daily the body had a fracture nobody saw before.
I believe she was struck, rendered incapacitated, and subsequently had intraoral gunshot wound by another person.
Banks, who could not be reached for comment, has maintained his innocence and has never been charged. And 2 independent prosecutors also ruled McConnell's death a suicide. This morning, the sheriff's office tells ABC News 3 medical examiners had already looked at the body and that there is no probable cause to indicate Michelle died by anything other than her own hand. Still, O'Connell's mom is convinced Banks is responsible.
Michelle deserves justice.
And the sheriff also claims the boyfriend can't be the killer because he filed a civil suit in the case, putting everything under the microscope.
Joseph Scott, you've been following this from the get-go. You covered this on the Nancy Grace show. Let me hear your take on this, if it's suicide or if the boyfriend did it. What's your opinion as a death investigator?
Yeah, let's take a look at what we have. First off, this autopsy report that the family has contracted with William Anderson to do. I have yet to see a copy of that report, so I don't know what his findings are specifically.
Right.
They keep kind of teasing along that they have more evidence that's going to point to this. If that's the case, then they need to go to the prosecutor and let them know what this evidence is, and so that they can begin to pursue this. Let's talk about the weapon that was used. The weapon that was used was this officer's service weapon. It's a .45 caliber handgun. Now, .45 caliber is from simply the perspective of mass. It's one of the largest handgun projectiles that exist. Our Army carried them. Our Marine Corps carried them for years and years as a sidearm. It's a very bulky projectile. As a matter of fact, I'll throw after the show, I'll throw an image of a .45 caliber projectile up on my Facebook so that people can see that compared to a couple of other rounds, and you'll get an idea for the size and the bulk of it. .45 caliber projectile is very robust, so it requires quite a bit of propellant, which is gunpowder, to drive it out of the barrel of the weapon. Now, when people think of someone being shot with a gun, they simply think of the bullet being destructive. But let's think about the injury that this woman has. She has got what's called an intraoral gunshot wound. In other words, in layman's terms, she stuck the muzzle of the weapon in her mouth and discharged the weapon. I put the autopsy sketch from the original autopsy on my Facebook page. You guys are welcome to take a look at it. It's only the sketch. It's nothing really graphic. It's just a drawing. If you'll notice on the corners of her mouth, there are these lacerations that they indicate there. That's what they refer to as gas injuries. When a weapon is discharged, the bullet is not the only thing coming out of the weapon. As a matter of fact, when someone shoots themselves in the head or they are shot in the head at close or contact range, what does the vast majority of the damage is going to be the gas, that rapidly expanding hot gas that's being injected into either the skull or the mouth. The reason her mouth lacerated was because the gas was contained in her mouth and expanded her jaws rapidly. If people at home will just imagine having the biggest balloon that they can imagine and blowing it up, and then without taking their lips away from the stem, letting the air back into their mouth, and you can feel the tension on your jaws. That kind of expansion times about 1,000, and it causes this ripping effect to take place. In my years of working suicides, and I worked a lot of them, and working homicides, I can only think of maybe in homicides of working just less than 5 probably that involved a press contact gunshot wound. That is where the muzzle is actually held against the head of somebody in a homicide and they're shot. Imagine forcing someone to take the weapon into their mouth. Now, this doctor who did the second autopsy claims that he has found a fractured jaw. If that's the case, that can easily be explained as a result of this expanding gas. That would be as a result of what's called a concussive fracture. Not only would her skull have fractured, more than likely, and the roof of her mouth, but also the weakest part of the bone in the jaw, the mandible, would have fractured as well, and that's what you're going to see. They're saying that there is no associated hemorrhage. I have yet to see the autopsy report, so I can't fully comment on that. But what was the coup de grace was the fact that she was struck in her spinal column with a bullet, which you would expect. This goes right into the base of the spinal column, into our primal brain, which controls all of our autonomic nervous system, our respiration, our heartbeat. So it was kind of immediate death. And people say, well, where's the hemorrhage? Well, one of the problems is if you immediately die, like if you blast into that area in the autonomic nervous system, your heart's going to stop pumping, so there's not going to be a lot of focalized hemorrhage around a fractured jaw. That's my thought, at least. But again, I haven't seen the report. It's also coming up that she was absent gunshot residue. He had gunshot residue. Gunshot residue testing, GSR as it's popularly known, you'll see it on TV and all these sorts of things, is probably one of the most single unreliable forensic tests that are out there. I commented on Nancy Grace's show the other day. It kind of got, muddled in there as, you're trying to get thoughts across. But I've actually seen studies where people that work in munitions factories that put together huge artillery shells, they actually did controlled tests on these people after leaving work, and these guys are around for Pelham all the time. They actually test negative in some cases for gunshot residue, and they're around this stuff all the time. It's wholly unreliable. It's more reliable than earlier generations of, say, paraffin tests, where they would have you put your hands into warm or hot wax. But it's not something that you can necessarily go to the bank with. And also, if this goes to trial, the big problem that prosecution is going to have, if they try to prosecute this guy and say, well, he had gunshot residue on his hands, yeah, he's a cop. He handles guns all the time. How do you know it wasn't generated from that? So you've got all these factors playing in. The jury is still out because we need to see this report that this guy is talking about, and that this information that they have that's out there. I'd really like to know something about Dr. William Anderson's autopsy. He's been involved in a number of high-profile autopsy cases and things that are out there, including the Kendrick Johnson case, where has been a big problem for some time. He went back and did a second autopsy on that. So he's out there doing autopsies for defenses. I'd be very interested to see what his history is in this case and what his involvement is. So I'm sorry I ran on, and I apologize to Alex because he needs time to comment. But I wanted to kind of say that and kind of throw that out there as far as forensics goes.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And Alex, why don't you weigh in on this?
No, I was going to say, when you dissect what Joe said, all the big words and medical stuff, it sounds to me like Joe's very suspicious of this doctor's, conclusion that this woman was murdered just because she had a broken jaw. And it sounds to me, I think the first person I would call as a defense witness would be Joe. And, I don't know how, even giving this doctor every benefit of the doubt, simply to say because a jaw was broken, he's able to extrapolate from that she was murdered is incredible without more. And I think Joe, very, very carefully and, using, very, very sophisticated medical terminology, basically has cast very serious questions on this doctor's conclusion that this woman was murdered. Let's face it. And why don't you admit it, Joe? Come clean.
No, all I'm saying is this: the physical nature of what you're talking about. If you to be able to take a weapon and stick it into somebody's mouth and pull the trigger. And that weapon we know was fired twice at the scene. According to the boyfriend, he claims that he heard one shot, pow, and then he broke for the door. He was sitting outside on his motorcycle, claims that because she was cleaning out the house, cleaning out her area, she was leaving. Then he says he heard another one, pow. Now, when we're going through our training as death investigators, one of the things that they'll tell us relative to, and I've actually taught this too because I've seen this played out, one of the things you'll find with people that are going to commit suicide, they will do what's called a test fire. They'll actually take a weapon and fire it once before they shoot themselves just to confirm that the weapon is functioning, because they're in a real primal state. They're in a real primal state at that point where they're saying, okay, I'm about to make this leap that I want to take my life, so therefore I'm going to test this weapon. And I'm not saying it's a suicide. I'm just saying it is very, very difficult to take a weapon and stick it into somebody's mouth and pull the trigger. I'd have to see all of the other associated trauma. I want to know what this guy has found in his autopsy that is shedding such a grand light on these circumstances. And I found something else very, very curious. When I was on the air on the Nancy Grace show the other day, the brother was on there, and he said that within the first hour of his arrival at the scene, he had requested that Florida Department of Law Enforcement take over the investigation and conduct an independent investigation. And I'm thinking, why would you request an investigation within the first hour? Now, I understand the practicality of it. You've got a shooting that's involved.
Joe,
that isn't,
why is that unreasonable?
I don't think that's unreasonable. Right? I know the guy's a cop, but I'm thinking,
right. So,
why was that the first thing?
Well, wait a minute. The guy's a cop. The woman is having a bad relationship with the guy. The woman is found dead. I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say, hey, wait a minute, let's have an independent investigation. I don't want this guy's buddies conducting an investigation and engaging in a cover-up. Now, I'm not saying that happened, but I can perfectly understand why some family relative would come in and say, hey, wait a minute, let's have an independent investigation.
Yeah, I think I was listening to the tone in which he said it. It almost implied that there was, I don't know, and maybe I'm just extrapolating here myself. I was thinking that maybe there's something other that's underlying here that hasn't been explored, that there's, they are having a bad relationship. He claims that they were all at a concert together just prior to this, and that all of them apparently had been drinking. I did note that she had alcohol on board, and they said that when they arrived at the scene, they being the police, if you read their police report, the first officer that got to the scene said that the boyfriend had strong smell of alcohol on his breath. I don't know. I agree. It should not be one of their own. They should not be investigating one of their own. I completely concur with that.
Let's face it, Joe. Let's face it. I'm not. Believe it or not, I'm not anti-cop. I like cops. I have law enforcement people in my family. I have friends that are police officers. But the bottom line is, there are cases where some police officers will protect each other, right? And it's the culture of the neighborhood, the culture of the community they come from. It's very difficult to believe that one of their own has committed a crime, and if they could turn their back and if they could look the other way, they will do that. Yep. So I don't see anything unreasonable. That family must have been aware, that brother must have been aware that there was serious tensions going on between the parties, and all of a sudden he finds his sister dead. If I was in the same situation as that guy, the first thing I would come in and say, I don't want the locals investigating this. I don't trust them. I want an independent investigation. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's the whole thing is very strange. The manner of death is very strange to begin with, but we will keep up with this story. Bill Cosby on his way to stand trial of all charges in a final story. Here's the story on that.
The feel in that courtroom was professional. Bill Cosby was there. He had to be there under law.
He sat at the defense table. He didn't talk with his attorneys very much at all. It was a packed courtroom. The defense was extremely aggressive toward that judge. Now, you've just heard Gloria all read the prosecution theory just in a nutshell, and they had Andrea Constand's statement read through the detective. In the months of January or February 2004, Andrea Constand was invited to and went to Bill Cosby's home. When she got there, she said she was having emotional issues. He went upstairs. He brought down, she says, 3 blue pills. He had her take them. He also told her to drink some wine. After that, she said she suddenly felt woozy. Her legs were weak. He had to assist her to a couch. She said that she was conscious in and out, but she wasn't able to stop him from sexually assaulting her. The defense fired back on cross-examination with that statement, saying that so many things that Andrea Constand had said, she crossed out. And she wrote other things, that she had gone to Bill Cosby's home several times before that, and she had gone after that she had accompanied him and met him at Foxwoods Casino when he was performing there. And they specifically went into that because Andrea Constand had originally written that Bill Cosby had invited her to his bedroom after the show because he was going to pack. She crossed that out. And then she originally had written that they laid down on the bed together with their legs touching. She crossed that out. The defense made a point of this. And that ultimately she said we were just close to each other at that point. Now, the prosecutor objected to all of this because a preliminary hearing is not credibility. That is not taken into account. It is a prima facie case. If there's probable cause, a crime has been committed. But the way the defense got it in, they kept saying consent. There was consent to all this. And the defense was very strong in their argument and during testimony of Bill Cosby's statement, saying that Bill Cosby admitted to all the things really that Andrea Constand did, but said it was consensual, that she was not given wine, that she was given some pills, but she wasn't woozy, she wasn't unconscious, she didn't object, she never said no, and she was able to say no. She was able to talk.
Alex Sanchez, this is finally going to trial, and evidently Bill Cosby is blind now all of a sudden. Convenient. What's your take on this? Does the evidence look strong enough on this accuser alone to get a conviction from what you see right now?
Well, by the way, I think that the purpose of these defense attorneys bringing up all these issues that they were bringing up, and they're good issues to bring up, was basically to alert the complaining witness in this case and the prosecution that we're going to tear you to pieces once we go to trial on this case. And this is what we have, and you should think twice about whether or not you want to come forward and get on the witness stand. That's the purpose of that, because as the commentator just said just a little while ago, that is all irrelevant. The only issue that's important is whether or not there was sufficient legal evidence to bring a case against Bill Cosby. Let me tell you something. Bill Cosby, in my view, my studying of the case, is an absolute dirtbag. I think he's guilty. I think he's a sexual predator. I'm against him being prosecuted in this case. And the reason why I'm against it is because he made a deal with the prosecution. And the prosecution admitted they made a deal that he wouldn't be prosecuted on this case. And the judge said, well, that's not on paper. And because it's not on paper, I'm not going to consider it valid. That's nonsense. You make a deal, you make a deal. And the prosecution
that was with
admitted
the old prosecutor, Alex, right?
Time, or the county at that time. And it's not like you make a deal with one prosecutor and that the next prosecutor is not bound by that. They're all bound by it. And so in that sense, I'm disturbed that Bill Cosby has been entered into a fraudulent agreement. Even though
so it's not that you think he's innocent, you just don't like the way the justice system is working out here.
Yeah, I don't like that. You can't have prosecutors making deals and then all of a sudden 10 years later deciding, hey, there's no more deal. Not only is there not a deal, but we're going to use all those statements you made against you. You know, I don't go for that. I go for playing fair. I go for playing up front, not for being sneaky and surreptitious. None of that business. And
Joe, yeah.
But on the other hand, the guy is who he is. You know.
58 women, Joe.
Man, I'm telling you, I'm disgusted on so many levels by this thing, and this is really kind of outside my realm, other than just, a human being that is a dad and a father and a husband, and I absolutely just, it makes me want to just grind my teeth down to a nubbin when I think about that. What the defense is going to do to every one of these women, and they're going to just crucify them on every level. They're going to make an effort to do that, and I understand that their job. I understand that completely, but they're nothing more than a barrier between those women and like Alex said, the dirtbag that is Cosby. And, he plied these women with drugs. I think that's one of the most insidious things about this. First off, not only is it very, very dangerous behavior, but it's because of what it can do to somebody. It puts them in a position where they become almost like zombies. He's known, or has admitted at least, to have used Quaaludes. Those are very difficult, virtually impossible.
Not even available anymore. They're so strong.
Yeah, except on the black market, you can find them rarely.
Right.
So that implies to me, because they've been banned for some time, that implies to me that he has had assistance getting his hands on these. And I would also like to see somebody else getting their in a ringer over this as well. People that were complicit in this along with him. Because there is one woman who I would like to see drugged before the court in this, and that is his wife. Because if maybe not charged, I want to see her on the stand. I would love to see this, and how she can sit back and still stand by her man, in the face of what this person has done to all these poor defenseless women. It just makes me want to vomit.
Strong statement. Let's go after some callers. Let's go first to Mary, and she is in Virginia. She says hello tonight. Good evening, Mary. You're live with Joseph Scott and Alex Sanchez.
Hi. Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Mary.
All right. How are you, Mary?
Hi. Well, geez, I'm just sitting here just listening to you guys and have so many emotions. With Cosby, I think that he is disgusting for what he did. But I have to say this, and I know a lot of people disagree with me. During the time that he was an up-and-coming actor, it was common practice at the Playboy Mansion and at all these celebrity parties and so on during the 60s and 70s and 80s, and probably still being done, that everyone goes and takes drugs and then they go to a room and have sex. What I'm saying is that young girl, the one that I forgot what her name is, who was 17 at the time, what the heck was she doing in the Playboy Mansion to begin with? I heard stories that the Playboy Mansion rooms were set up with KY jelly and Vaseline and drugs and wine and all kinds of condoms and everything. So if you're going to go into one of these rooms as a woman, I would think, I wouldn't be putting myself out there like that. You know
Don't
what
put
I'm
yourself
saying?
in a situation. You're saying.
Yeah. And so, not negating what he's done, somehow some of these women have to take a little bit of responsibility for it. It's like being out in the middle of the street and just waiting to see if a car's going to hit you. I don't know.
Mary, I was going to say, Mary, I think I think you're absolutely right. I think what happens, though, is that many people, men and women, but in this case a lot of women, they fall prey to the concept of being around famous people.
Yes,
Bill Cosby's going to be
yes.
there. You know, the guy who runs Playboy is going to be there. These people have been on TV. I'm going to be kissing the heavens. I'm going to the Playboy. I'm going to be on TV. And all my friends are going to know I went there. I'm living this wonderful life. But it's all a big fraud, because when all is said and done, these people are just people, and they were there to advance their own interests.
Exactly.
And they took advantage of people that were so in awe of them.
Yeah.
And people in power and famous people and well-known people, they know this. And they're looking for people just like these women. And when something happens to these women, they turn around and say, hey, we didn't tell you to come here. You knew there were drugs here. You knew there was alcohol here. You knew what was going to happen. And that's why they get away with it.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm sure that behind him there's hundreds of others that haven't been caught, including child actors that were raped in order to get some of these, and I can't remember some of them, but one killed himself who said he was raped while he was a child actor in one of the television programs on TV.
Right.
That's how he got the part. And things like that. And some actresses, like Susan Sarandon, who said she slept in order to get ahead on her career. And so did Marilyn Monroe. And a lot of these actresses, they knew when they started out, you either could, sleep on the director's couch and get ahead, or walk out the door and, you never knew which way it would go for you as career-wise. But anyway, on Freddie Gray, I have a question, because I understand now that the police officers that are being charged are filing a lawsuit against the state. Did you guys hear that?
Yes, I heard about
that. Did not.
Defamation of character?
I did not hear that. Let me tell you something about lawsuits that are filed by people facing criminal charges, right?
Yeah.
That's a very, in many ways, could be a clever move, because if you file a lawsuit, then all of a sudden you could start getting people's testimony on the grounds that you're suing them. You get them to give testimony under oath. Whereas in a criminal case, you may not be able to get their testimony under oath until they're actually on trial. And so you use the civil proceedings basically as a discovery proceedings. Plus, you get to nail down people's testimony. You may have access to all kinds of records that you may not get until you go to the trial on your criminal case. So a lot of defense attorneys use the civil proceedings for the purposes of enhancing their criminal case. That's the real purpose.
I understand. I guess the legal question I had for you, Alex, was the fact that I thought that a municipality, like the federal government or the state, were immune from torts, lawsuits against them.
No, that's not true, and that varies from city to city, state to state.
Okay.
The government, they're not like kings. They sometimes have the ability to. People sometimes have the ability to sue, so it's not absolute. Just like if you walk down a street in New York City and you fall in an open hole, you could sue the city of New York.
Right.
Because they were negligent. It's
but
not like they have complete immunity.
They're employees, though. They're civil servants as police officers.
Yeah, that's true. But they're suing. That's true. But just because you were a civil servant doesn't mean that you are not allowed to bring civil cases against the government if you've been victimized. Why should
No,
you?
that's true. But I mean, when you think about it, if the state brings charges against you, just like if someone is fired or something, and then you turn around and sue them for defamation, I mean, it just seems kind of awkward,
Yeah, but what if in fact it's true? What if you were living in a jurisdiction where there was a very corrupt city government, and they decide they're going to go bad-mouthing honorable people and then firing them and throwing them out of their positions that they've worked many years to obtain, for their own personal grudges and political vendettas, don't you think it's a good idea that they should have a right to sue?
Oh, absolutely. I was just asking you about the legal aspect of it because I thought I had heard, or I kind of looked it up, that there is some immunity, but not always.
Right. That's a correct assessment.
And then I have a question for Joseph about Freddie Gray and the spinal cord injury.
Yes, ma'am.
They said that his spinal cord injury was a complete spinal cord injury, right?
You broke up. I couldn't hear you, Mary. You broke up.
They said that his spinal cord injury was a complete spinal cord injury.
Okay.
Okay, so it couldn't have happened while he was being dragged or into the van or as he talked and asked for help or moved, because if it's a complete spinal cord injury, he wouldn't even been able to talk.
Right, and there was one spot, there's one video, it's that video that keeps showing of him
with dragging his legs.
He's dragging his legs, but his arms are moving, and he's conversing. I was kind of compelled by that when I saw that. I'm glad you brought this up. If it was a total transection of the spinal cord, I think that would have been greatly compromised. And I'm still not completely sure where the insult took place, at what cervical level it took place. Because
but that should be in the autopsy report, right?
It's
either C3 or above.
Right. It would have to be C3 or above. But he was, if you watch that video, he was, his head was moving back and forth.
Yeah.
He was blinking. He was verbal. He was having a conversation with these guys. And so, could it have been an initial
in the beginning of it?
Right,
maybe.
and then the coup de grace, of course, was him being bounced down the road,
right.
and then it was finally completely transected at that point.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic question. Because if it was an instant and immediate event, we wouldn't. This would have a completely different complexion to it.
So it was something like, that like you're making, I hate to compare it to soup, but you're making soup and everyone's adding an ingredient. And I think that I agree with you that when he was dragging that leg, and most lay people wouldn't notice that, he was dragging that leg.
Right.
Like that leg was limp. I think he was already when they took him off the bike and put him to the ground, I think he suffered his first injury at that point. But
either that, or he was concussed in some way, so that where he had sustained some kind of concussion, maybe he was slightly compromised in that way. It's really hard to tell, and I would be really interested if both his brain and his spinal cord were kept, which is very normal practice, or not normal, but it's not beyond the pale, and that the brain and the spinal cord would actually both be sent to a neuropathologist, and they've got some of the best ones in the world there in town at Johns Hopkins that specialize in trauma. And I would be, and I have yet to see a neuropath report on him, and I would really like to see that. That's a very valid point you bring up. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. It was great talking with you guys again, and I enjoy calling in and speaking with great minds that are on the show. And Jordan, thank you for the forum. And thank you for having all this. Yeah, have a nice evening.
Thank you for all your support, Mary.
Jordan, they're calling me on my case right now, so I'm going to have to bid goodbye to everybody on this fantastic program tonight, including your guests and the audience. It's been a lot of fun.
So take care of Mary, and Alex, I'll speak to you a little bit later. I'll email you.
God bless, Alex. Good to talk to you, man.
Joe. Bye-bye.
Okay. So we do have one last caller. Let's go to Huntington Beach and say hello to Sarah. And she says hello tonight. Good evening, Sarah. You're live on a King Jordan radio show.
Hi, Jordan. Hi, Joseph.
Hey, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good. Good to be back with you guys.
Yeah.
A lot of very, very interesting topics tonight. I think the whole Freddie Gray case was, just to simplify it, a terrible chain of events. And I don't know if we'll ever know exactly what happened and when it happened. And I kind of have a mindset that this should have been a civil case versus a criminal case. I don't see intent on the officer's part in any way. But then again, I'm not hearing the testimony because there's no cameras in in Maryland. But it is a terrible, terrible case and horrible that those kinds of things happen. And hopefully it's a learning experience for police officers everywhere. The other thing that was brought up was, good old Bill Cosby. Yes, I agree. He is definitely a dirtbag. But there's a far cry from being a dirtbag to a rapist. And I tend to, I share a lot of Mary's thoughts on this, especially for Andrea Constant. I think that's her name, for the one that's going to trial. Because if it's true that she continually had contact with him, maybe it wasn't sexual contact, but she continually had contact with him many times throughout a year, I think, that bothers me. Why would anyone in their right mind have 5 seconds with him if he raped her?
Well, the prosecution will tell you that the experts will tell you that they will stay with their, quote, victims until that's going to be their answer to that question. Even
maybe if she was 7 years old and defenseless and it was a stepfather or an uncle or somebody like that, of course. But she was a grown woman. Anyway, it bothers me that she has she settled civilly. She got some sort of sum of money, and I don't know. Like I said, I have to go back to that. And why would she have any contact with him? Also, I'm curious, after that specific night, what were the circumstances? Was she able to leave the house of her own accord? Was she passed out until 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning? Was she able to get dressed and say bye-bye? I'm curious about all of those questions that have not been answered, at least publicly they haven't been answered. The other case, O'Connell and the suicide versus homicide and criminal homicide, because I do very well understand your lessons, Joseph, about homicide and how a homicide can be actually an accident. But let's remember Phil Spector and how he was convicted for Lana Clarkson, and the gun was in her mouth. And when Alex and you and Jordan all started talking about the case, I thought, it took they had to find a third pathologist to kind of find one little thing that's going to maybe lean towards murder. And then I thought, the more you dig, the more you find. But then when someone said this word, and to me this is a key word, that he was on his motorcycle and she was cleaning up her things because she was leaving, that to me says a lot, because in domestic violence, and I don't know what the history is, if they ever had domestic violence prior to this, that is the most dangerous time for a woman, when she's preparing to leave. So to me, that's like a red flag right there. And, I put all these scenarios in my little brain, and I say, well, how would he get that gun in her mouth? Well, maybe he hit her in the jaw, and she was lost consciousness or almost lost consciousness, and he put it in her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and then I also want to know, where was the body found? Was it found in a bed? Was she on a couch? Was she on the floor? Because if you're going to kill yourself, I think that if you're going to even fire a practice shot, that you're going to think about where you're going to be when you kill yourself. I would think.
She was found on I saw the images on television. Apparently she was found immediately adjacent to the bed on the floor, and I think her head was partially obscured by the duvet. When
so she was
when
sitting in a sitting position on the floor?
No. She was lying, I think, on her back. It seems like they refer to her as being a supine position, and she was actually laying on top of his holster for the weapon. And
okay.
When the police walked in, was observed on the vanity in the bathroom adjacent to the sink.
So he moved the weapon from the scene?
Well, he moved it into the master bath away from her, which that could be construed procedurally, at least, if he's in fear that she is still alive, that she's going to pick the weapon up and do something else with it. And, I don't know. I don't know why he would have done that. And, that's also been one of the other bones of contention with this, Sarah, is that the weapon was absent her DNA. I'm curious to know if he had wiped the weapon down, if the weapon was wet, like had been run under the faucet. What specifically had happened relative to that? In my position in media, I don't have an opportunity many times to see things like, you see the police report, but you don't actually see the crime scene report. And it's only in certain circumstances I have yet to see an autopsy report from either side on this case. The only thing that we were passed on was the sketch that I put on my Facebook page. And that's, if I get my hands on the autopsy report, I can guarantee you I'll post it on my Facebook page and tag everybody in it so that you can see it.
Good.
But I have yet to see it at all. So that's one of the things that's, I'm kind of waiting like everybody else is. They're talking about what a big case this is, and we'll make some of the information available. Let's release it and see some of this stuff.
Right. Boy, alcohol and guns, huh? Pretty bad combination.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I've seen far more mischief occur relative to alcohol and firearms than I ever have just strictly with firearms. You put alcohol into the mix, and it is a deadly, deadly recipe.
Well, the other case, I'm so sorry I can't remember his name. He was just acquitted about a month ago, and he too was a police officer, and his wife died of a gunshot wound on New Year's Eve. Is it coming to you, Joseph? I think you may have been on Nancy talking about it.
Yeah, is this the case out of Kansas? I believe it was out of Kansas, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. He had shaved his chest and he had scratches.
Yeah.
You know what? Honestly and truly, and what am I? I'm nothing but a little old lady. I really, truly believe he's innocent. I really do. Listening to everything and reading everything that I possibly could about it. But this case, it just, I don't know. If she's getting ready to pack up and leave, that to me says something. But I know that's not legal evidence, and that's not criminal evidence, and that's nothing. But it's a red flag.
Well, the case
anyway,
the case in Kansas gave me far more pause than this case does. The case in Kansas, those appear to me, at least what I could see, those appear to be defensive marks. Those were not shaving-related insults that he had, from what I could see. That really made me scratch my head a long time, taking a look at that. But, it is what it is. The court finds what they're going to find, and I can have my opinions all day long, just like any of us can.
Right.
So that case was far more stimulating to me than the O'Connell case, that's for sure.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, my darlings, both of you, I shall sign off and always a pleasure, Joseph, and I love all your Facebook things. And sometimes I can't read all of them, but you wouldn't believe how many things I have saved. And King Jordan, I guess I am your second most loyal caller, and I will take that title. I'll be happy with that if you get the dig, Jordan. I hope you do. And anyway, you guys take care. Have a great holiday weekend coming up.
Yes, enjoy it. Official, unofficial start of summer. So enjoy that.
All right, love you guys. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Sarah. We love you too. Thank you.
Okay.
So Joseph, when will you be back on Mrs. Grace's show?
Oh, I think I'll probably be back on more than likely next Thursday. More than likely, it's hard to say. I make my appearances. I'm teaching summer classes, right now, and getting ready to do a little travel related to work, and very excited about that. I'll be posting pictures relative to that, and got a few things in the works right now that kind of super top secret stuff I can't really talk about quite yet, but just a little tease, and we're very excited. A lot of great opportunities popping up, and I ask everybody out there to please check us out at Jacksonville State University. Our web address is jsu.edu. One of the finest schools in the South, and certainly, in my opinion, one of the oldest and finest forensic investigative undergraduate programs in the nation. We're one of the oldest in the country, with great facilities and that sort of thing. Please check our university out if you're looking for a great, affordable education for your kids and a good, safe environment where they'll get a complete college experience there. So come over to JSU and check us out. And I'd like to say thank you to your entire audience. You've got so many kind people out there, and I appreciate them taking time to just listen to what an old death investigator has to say. And Jordan, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have a platform. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome anytime, Joseph. It's a pleasure. Enjoy your weekend. Okay?
Yeah, I sure will. Yeah, happy Memorial Day, and let's keep the true meaning of it in mind.
Okay, Joseph. Have a good one. Thanks for everything. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the Joseph Scott Morgan and Alex Sanchez. Okay, everybody, have a wonderful weekend. It is the unofficial summer. Also, we'll be back on Wednesday, 9:30 Eastern Time, with somebody new. David Bruno from the Fox Network will join us. Shout out to Madeline Pager and Company and Mary for those beautiful things that she, the artwork that she does. Shout out to Sarah for making a beautiful ball. We'll speak to you on Wednesday, not Thursday. Remember that, Wednesday night.
Geico presents sharing versus oversharing. Earlier this week, Claire Tippins shared a princess nickname generator, 3 pictures of her dog wearing a tutu, and 2 online quizzes, including what candy is your dream castle made of? Claire, your sharing has tipped the sugar scale and turned into oversharing. But have no fear, princess. Geico has something worth sharing with your internet kingdom, like how you could save hundreds on your car insurance just by visiting geico.com. No magic wand required. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Geico presents sharing versus oversharing. Yesterday, Cliff Sora shared a top 10 list of hot fusion restaurants, a vegan gluten-free mashup recipe, and a podcast featuring organic food trends. Oh, TMI, too much internet information. That's oversharing. Cliff, Geico has something worth sharing with your friends. Like how on Geico.com you could save hundreds on your car insurance, update your policy, and report a claim. Gluten-free info that's easy to swallow. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.